right? What does it mean to lose your life? Yes, to give up control, to give up the reins, to let Christ direct us, to let his paths forge ahead, and we just follow in that same direction. But you live your life in such a way that you say, I surrender to God. Maybe a good prayer in the morning when we get up is, Lord, direct me to the places my feet need to go today. And then as you take those steps, you say, is this where God would want me to go? How many of you were scared to death as teenagers because your parents said, Jesus is going to come back. You better not be doing something when Jesus comes back. How many of us avoided some major problems in our youth because we were afraid Jesus might come back in that moment? I did. I was afraid for my life. I knew that if Jesus caught me doing something or saying something or being somewhere, that I might go to hell as a result of it. Well, in the direction of the steps of Jesus, he says, I need you to loosen the reins. I need you to let me guide you where you need to go. Let me help you, and then you will save your life. Number 5, we've got to support our master. Again, here in this first part, verses 26 and 27, we support the things that the Lord supports. We do the things that he would want us to do. We are there for our master, okay? Now, in a little bit, we're going to talk a little bit more about this thought, but I'll address it now real quickly. We're taught by Jesus here in Luke and in Matthew as well that I need to be careful what I invest in, with the treasures that I keep, the possessions that I have. Billy had a great point Sunday when he was talking about every time you drive down 59, they're putting in another storage unit place. I mean, they're everywhere. Subdivision storage units. I mean, you got them now where they'll just clear a whole lane of trees and they'll just throw up a fence and say, park your camper here, $500 a month, and people are dying to get their campers in there to park. We have so much stuff. And when we should be giving, sharing, living on a very limited income and budget, we still can do great things with what we have. And so Jesus is identifying, if you want to follow me, I've got to be your master. You can't serve two. The word mammon is used in Matthew's gospel. Serve God and mammon. The idea of mammon is of money or of possessions or of things like talents. And so I want to support my master. Why is it that we still feel, even in the New Testament context, we use the word tithe a lot for our giving? The tithe actually preceded the old law. We know that because Abraham gave a tithe to Melchizedek, and that was several generations before Moses, and that was before the law was offered. But we're supposed to give, and so sometimes we'll think in matters of a tithe. We'll say, well, I'm going to give 10%. But even if we give that minimal of 10%, imagine what would happen if we said, this year, I'm going to give God more. This is the year. If he's my master, I'm going to give him more. I'm going to start right now, this next Sunday, I'm going to give him more. Well, we got to crunch it, right? Our budgets, we've done that going through taxes the last few weeks. It's frustrating. We're all waiting to get there to the 15th. Unless the eclipse is really the end, which I don't think it is. But anyways, we're waiting until that tax day to file all our stuff. Maybe we file an extension, and we get so worried and frustrated about all this stuff with money. What would happen if we decided that for the rest of this year, if we're doing much more, if we're going to be doing much more for God in 24, what if I determined that I was going to double my contribution this month? What would happen if I said, you know what? I'm gonna take and I'm gonna increase. I did a sermon one time at Pine Hill, and I've told this story many times, but this sweet lady, I said, isn't it time you gave God a raise? And she said, well, I've been given the same thing since 1950 or 60, whatever. And I said, well, cost of living, all these things. I said, don't you think God deserves a raise? And she said, I never thought of it like that. But we give and we share because he's our master. And everything we have really belongs to him anyway. So our goal should be to honor our master by giving and sharing with as many people as we possibly can. Not be so stingy. God can't give it to us if our hand is closed. We've got to keep that hand open. And so that's one way we can do more in 24. Support your master. Number 6, following Jesus means forgetting about material comforts. And that is that you don't worry about all the things you think you need to have. I have learned, and this happens to me more than I would like to admit, in travel, I have forgotten things. Okay, you get there and you say, oh, I forgot, gel for the hair, or I forgot deodorant. That's a big one. You got to have the deodorant. I forgot a pair of shoes once. Went on a trip, didn't have anything but the shoes I had on my feet. Maybe you get somewhere and you realize, I went one time, got in the car, drove all the way to North Alabama, got in the hotel room, unpacked, forgot my CPAP machine. Now, if you are on a CPAP, you know the pain and the struggle. I couldn't go to sleep that night. I immediately got on Facebook. Does anybody in the Florence area have a CPAP machine? And I had a friend at the school, happened to have a second machine. He let me borrow it. I wasn't even worried about the mask. I'm a germ guy. I don't like them. So I didn't even care. I had to sleep that night. So got the machine. But maybe you've been somewhere and you've forgotten something. Some of the things that you forget, you could live without. You don't have to have it, but you think you do. There's a lot of times when we go and we travel, you forget your toothpaste or your soap. You can just call down the front desk. But we obsess over certain things that we think we have to have. But we've learned that we can go without that maybe for a day, for a couple days. What about the possessions we have in our home? How many of those material comforts? I'll tell you what, when we have a solar flare or one of our enemies decides to hit our satellites, we're going to have a whole generation of millennials out in the streets going, no, when their phones don't work. Those material comforts that we get so used to, we can't do math anymore. We use the phone. We don't read books. We Google, We can't even find something on television without asking Siri or Alexa to tell us what it is and where it's at. How many times in a day do we depend on technology? Those are material comforts that we don't have to have. You'd be surprised what would happen if you gave your phone a fast for 24 hours. If you said this week, no technology. Now, most of us wouldn't be able to make it because of our jobs and things like that, but to say I'm just going to limit, what if I said this week I'm going to fast from television? No movies, no TV for this whole month or this week. Just say I'm just going to avoid it. All the material comforts that we think we have to have, if you've ever been to a third world country, you have seen that people exist without these things. They exist. People live in the middle of the desert without food. There are people who live without the comforts that we have, and they're perfectly fine. So we've done it to ourselves. We feel like we have to have so much stuff. And so Jesus is saying, you've got to forget about those material comforts, and you've got to start focusing on spiritual stuff. If I focus 95% of my day on stuff that's happening on this earth, I am wasting time. I can't just give God 5% of my thoughts. I need to be thinking every day about spiritual things, heavenly things, godly things, how to be a better Christian, a follower of Jesus. My grandpa used to always pray, at the end of his prayers, almost every prayer, he would say, let us be better Christians tomorrow than we were today. And that sat with me. I don't know why, but he would say that. And I think, what does that mean? Well, that means tomorrow I got to try harder. Tomorrow I got to do better. So forget material comforts. Stop focusing on material things. And then number 7, neglect other responsibilities. Now, I'm going to give you a news flash tonight. There are some things on your schedule that ought not to be there. There are some things that you're doing or your kids are doing that they don't have to be on your schedule. You will kill yourself to ensure that certain appointments are met when in 2-3 years down the road, you're not even going to remember those appointments. You'll fly off the handle, try to get somewhere. You gotta be somewhere to church. Let's say we start at 10 and you're here at 9:63, right? You're blowing in 4 minutes late, right? And so we say we're going to get there. We're going to get there. Same thing with events and activities and with work. There'll be a day when we'll realize that those particular things we spent all of our efforts on were worthless. They were useless to us. making a priority for the things that are spiritual is paramount in the life of a believer. I shouldn't miss worship or Bible study unless there is something really tragic that's happened, or maybe something that I cannot avoid, or a sickness, or helping someone. Maybe I'm getting an ox out of a ditch, right? I should put that as a priority. I should put my prayer life as a priority. I should put my studying of God's Word as a priority, as a challenge that I'm going to read the Bible. I'm going to study the Bible. Talking about Jesus ought to be a priority. I need to put aside some of those other responsibilities. What if we did this on the first of the month? We made a list of all the things that we have to do in the month of April. And we put next to it, does it honor God or does it honor me? Does it honor God or does it honor my family? Who is being honored by this activity? Who is being glorified? What could I cut off my schedule? See, if we will take stuff off our plate that you shouldn't have there anyway, you're going to find that you got more room to do the things that are more important. And so Jesus is saying, what's the most important thing to you? Now, this is a little critical here. It sounds harsh, but Jesus illustrates this by the man who comes and says, I've got to go bury my father. All right? Let me go bury my father, and then I'll come back and follow you. And what does Jesus say? Let the dead bury their dead. How many of you think that's a little harsh? Sounds a little harsh, doesn't it? There's got to be a reason why Jesus says this. Jesus says similar things when he says, losing your life to save it. This idea of letting the dead bury their dead is there's nothing you can do for that individual. And more than likely, it's just an excuse. I mean, if your dad is being buried in 3 hours, why aren't you already at the graveside? Why aren't you, in this day and age, if you really lost a family member, why isn't he there? By the time news got to him, his dad would have already been buried, right? So this sounds to me like just an excuse. I've got to take care of my mom, I've got to take care of finances, Daniel, you got an idea? Right. 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 It's true. So they have a period of mourning. They have a period that they're supposed to grieve. I'll tell you what I think this context is. What's the context of Jesus' words? It's about material possessions, right? Y'all with me? Material possessions. Death of a father. You see where I'm going? He's the heir. I need to go back to take care of my father's affairs. Why? Because little brother's going to get it if he's not there. One of the craziest things you'll see in your life, and some of you have seen it hundreds of times probably, is that when the matriarch or the patriarch of a family dies, the kids fuss and fight over every last possession. They're grabbing, both of them got arms on the china cabinet, out the door and in the door and out the door, and they got you throwing photos in the back of a car, and they're taking china and wrapping it up in bubble wrap and trying to sneak it out a window. And this is what I believe Jesus is identifying, is that don't worry about material possessions. Well, I got to go take care of my father's. He's just passed away. Let the dead bury their dead. You don't need to focus right now on your father's estate. You don't need to think about your place as an heir to your father's fortune or whatever. Instead, you're thinking about spiritual things. Steve? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. Right. That's a great point. You don't know when the hour is going to come when your soul is required of you. And so don't worry about something you can't change. You need to take care of salvation today. I've had conversations with people before that have said, we're talking about baptism and salvation, and they say, well, my grandma and grandpa or my mom and dad were members of such and such church, and they've passed. What does that mean about them? You know, are they going to be lost? Are they going to be? And I don't remember where I heard this. I learned it from a preacher at one time, but I usually ask the question, what do you think they would want you to do? If they were sitting right here in front of you, and you know what the Bible teaches, and they're sitting right here next to you, what do you think they would tell you to do? Well, they would tell you to get saved. Regardless of where they're in eternity, they would want you to be saved. So you've got a decision to make to follow the Lord today. That's why I really hate people who say, I hate it when we study about baptism, and we talk to somebody about salvation, and they go, well, I just need another week to think about it, another couple weeks to think about it. Or I had an old gentleman one time, and I studied with him for over 3 years. And he'd say, well, you know, there's wild oats that got to be sown. And I'm like, you're in your 80s, all right? You should be at the point in your life where you're asking the question, am I ready for the hour that Jesus is going to call me? And I told him, I sat at his table, we went through 12 Bible studies, 12 weeks in a row. And on the last study, we've been studying baptism the past 4 weeks. Do you know what you need to do? Yes. What do you need to do? I need to be baptized. Do you know you're lost if you don't? Yes, I'm lost if I'm not baptized. Then let's go now. And he said, I'm not ready yet. You know what the Bible teaches. You know your condition if you're lost and you don't want to do it. And it took the preacher after me another 2 or 3 years to finally get him to the water. But he was holding out, and he was holding out. And I don't know what the specific issue was. I know that he passed a few years ago, and I'm grateful that he was baptized. But his children were grown up in the church because the wife went to church, took the kids. But as they got out on their own, they acted like their father. And they didn't go to church anymore because he didn't make it a priority, because he knew what he needed to do. He just wouldn't do it. And the urgency of salvation, the urgency of discipleship, Jesus says it's now. You don't let something happen. Oh, I got some affairs I need to take care of. I got some people at home. In Matthew's gospel, I just got married and I need to go take care of some of my honeymoon stuff. If you just got married, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be there, but you're coming here with an excuse. And Jesus says, I'm going to take those excuses away from you. If you need to be a disciple, you need to be a disciple today. You don't mill around and look for an excuse to not serve God. So Jesus is getting his disciples ready to make some very tough decisions. And unfortunately, some of them wouldn't be willing to do that, like Judas is an example. And then the last thing here is pursuing him until death. And he says here, there are some of you that will not taste death until you see the kingdom come with power. You will see the establishment of the church. At some point, we need to spend a considerable amount of time identifying that the kingdom and the church are synonymous. In other words, they are equal. So the church, talk about the kingdom of Christ, we're talking about the New Testament church. When Jesus talks about kingdom work, kingdom living, all those things, building the kingdom, it's referring to the church. And so he's saying to his disciples, some of you right here are going to see the establishment of the church. You're going to see the earthly kingdom be established. And I promise you'll see it. For those who say that the kingdom's going to be established at the end of time, or that they're going to reign on the earth at the end of time, completely misunderstand Jesus' thought here. Because Jesus is saying, you will see it. Now, if the kingdom isn't the church, and it's something afar off, we got some old guys hanging around here. Because they wouldn't taste death till they saw it. Right? Y'all with me? We got some 2,000-year-old guys walking around here somewhere if the kingdom hasn't come. The kingdom did come around AD 33. And when Peter preaches that sermon, and they baptize about 3,000 people, all of these things that are happening were directed by Christ, and they're proving that the teachings of Jesus, the prophecies of Jesus were fulfilled. And so he says, you're going to see it come with power. So for us, the church is here. The kingdom is here. We're a part of it. But ultimately, we should look towards heaven. We should look towards the day that we are called home. He says, you're not going to taste death till you see the kingdom. Well, we all will see heaven. We'll see eternity. And so maybe we direct our minds towards this thought. If I were to die tonight, if I knew that my hour was in 2 hours, what decisions would I make in the next 2 hours? What would you do? Would you call somebody? Would you go somewhere? Would you visit someone? Would you spend that 2 hours in prayer? Would you gather up your most loving family members and pray together. What would you do if you had 2 hours? Jesus is saying to his disciples, you need to live every moment like that. That the hour is coming, and I need to be prepared. So instead of saying something or doing something that's not going to honor God, I choose to do or say something that he's going to be glorified in. So I'm careful what I do, careful what I say, careful how I treat people. Make things right. Jesus says, even if you have a problem with your brother and you come into worship, lay your gift down, go make it right, come back. Our relationships are important. Resolve conflict. Honor your debts. Pay your debts. Do all these things that he's discussed here in this little section of Scripture to be a good disciple of Christ. Honor your parents. Take care of your loved ones. Help the sick. These are things that Jesus has identified in both Luke and Matthew that his disciples would do. And so if I've got an hour to live or 2 hours to live or 24 hours to live, I should be thinking about who I need to talk to and what I personally need to do to get ready. Those hours that you wait for surgery, y'all had some of those? Where you go to that waiting room and you sit there and they put that uncomfortable gown on and you sit and you wait. It's frustrating when you know that you're going to go under. You're a little nervous going underneath that anesthesia. Am I going to wake up? Am I going to, usually 99 times out of 100, there's not even a delay or a problem. But we do have those fears. And so we should look at every single day as if when I close my eyes, I don't know if I'll open them again. I don't know that in the morning I'll have another day to serve God. So what can I do this hour? Who do I need to talk to? What do I need to do? And that's the way we ought to live every day. And not with finality and fear, but in joy of the resurrection. That I can't wait to see Jesus face to face. And I'm going to take what years I have left of my life, and I'm going to invest it in something that is profitable for God and is memorable to the people around me, as I want to glorify the Lord. So those decisions that are made are an honor to God as being a committed follower of Jesus. I thought that was seagulls for a minute, and it's a siren and a kid. So any other thoughts about what we talked about tonight? So let's take up our cross, let's follow him every day, and also encourage other cross bearers. When you see someone who's going through a struggle, if they need a shoulder to lean on, maybe they got to drop part of that cross on our shoulders a little bit. Let's do that. Let's walk through life together and be strong followers of Jesus. Starting Sunday morning, we're going to be beginning a new month, obviously, of sermons. We're going to be focusing on evangelism. I'm going to throw this out here real quick. I would like to have 10 Bible studies with new people this month. That's my commitment. And if you've got somebody that you know is interested in having a Bible study or just a conversation about Jesus, that is on the top of my priority list in the month of April. So if you've got somebody that's interested, somebody that needs a visit, that there might be a Bible study, give me an address and I'm on it, because this is the month. We're going to talk about evangelism, but we're going to do evangelism. We're not just going to talk about it, we're going to do it. So let's focus this month on who we can reach for Christ. All right, that's all we have time for tonight. Again, Sunday morning, 9 o'clock class and 10 o'clock worship. We'll see you then. And don't forget the breakfast.